Reading along. It's really good, man. I'm so enjoying the MREI book.
Where are you up to, Ed? I missed so. I'm sorry, I missed so many classes. I've been so busy.
That's right.
But where are you guys at?
So let's do this while we're waiting for everybody to log in. Let's kind of recap. So we talked about mindset for a long time. And then on page 123, this is where we start getting into like action and what we're doing, right? So on page 125, Gary Keller introduces us to it's the first time we have mention of the 5 models, right? There's the net worth model, the financial model, the network model, lead generation model, and acquisition model, right? Those are the 5. That is what Gary Keller defines as the major models of a real estate investor, right? And so the net worth model, we've actually already been starting, whether you realize it or not. On page 127, he says the net worth model, there's 3 parts to it. One is you learn the path of money, right? So remember this chart here, the chart on page 129, that little nugget right there. Page 129, we've been talking about that one for a while. Like, you earn money either by human capital or by capital assets. And then what do you do with it from there on, right? Second here, let me shut down the music. All right, am I recording? Hey, I am recording. Okay, cool. So you learn the path. So the economic model, the net worth model is you learn the path of money, which we've been doing. You manage a personal budget. Right, so we've talked about that a little bit, but not a lot. But everyone, we should be planning a budget. And the purpose of the budget, according to Gary Keller, is so that you can plan accordingly, so that you maximize the amount you have left over that you can use for investing. So that's the purpose of budgeting. It's not about punishing or planning. It's more just trying to make sure you have as much money left over so you can invest as much as possible. And then the third thing he says is you track your personal net worth. So those are the 3 parts of the net worth model. You learn the path of money, you manage a personal budget, right? It doesn't say you create a budget, it says you manage it, which means it's an ongoing thing. And then number 3 is you track personal net worth. Not like you determine your net worth or you calculate your net worth, you track your net worth. Track implies that this is an ongoing thing, which is why on the net worth spreadsheet that we're all using that came from Ben Kinney, it's a monthly thing. So hopefully, if you're doing this correctly, and I'm working my way to personally to doing this correctly, hopefully you're doing this at least on a monthly basis where you calculate your net worth, right? So you guys, those 3 parts are the net worth model, and then we'll continue from here, and we're going to keep going. So we should be. I'm on page 131, 132 right in there. Hey, for those of you guys who don't know, that's my better half right there. Rebecca's on the call. Because we're a team. We're doing this together. And somewhere, I think, hey, Kevin, are you available? Is Kevin on the line? Kevin Klingel? Kevin, I think you just muted. So I think he's logging in. He'll be with us here shortly, hopefully. But yeah, that's where we're at right now. Anybody, while we're waiting for Kevin to log in, anybody want to share any victories, lessons learned, any of that kind of thing to date from the last week? Anybody go out and buy some investment property this past week?
Well, actually, we just bought a condo at the beach in Santa Monica in Sea Colony. And I was on the phone this morning with my accountant to try to figure out, could we swing hanging on to our existing home and use it as a leveraged asset, lease that out and have a positive cash flow, which could maybe also help us cover the beach condo where we would live. So the answer is yes, I actually did.
There you go. That's awesome. Way to go, boy. I'll tell you something interesting. I'm helping some friends of mine buy a condo up in Palos Verdes. and we stumbled into a property, and if, you know, like I do, I'm calculating, you know, what's the market value of the property? Is it well priced? All that kind of stuff. And it was one of those times where I'm looking at it and I'm calculating my numbers, and I'm like, God damn, you could flip this property. You could totally flip this property. They're not going to use it for that purpose. But I was like, man, this thing is, you could make a pretty penny flipping it. And so it's one of the, if they don't end up buying it, but it looks like we're going to lock up escrow today. But if they don't, I'll bring it before you guys. I'm not in a position to buy it right now, but you could make money doing it.
Well, this property, this condo as is, which is a little dated. I mean, you could live in it, but it's kind of 80s looking.
Yeah.
It appraised for $200,000 more than I paid for it. And the exact same unit already redone, just sold last week for $500,000 more. So I think I got a good deal.
Let me see if I can check in with Kevin here. Okay, hold on a second. Well, I see Kevin on the he's on the.
There we go.
Hey.
All right, I'm in. My computer was not working, so I'm on Josie's computer.
Now, did you hear us at all? Were you hearing the conversation at all?
No.
Okay, I was just saying lots of good things about. So everybody, so this is Kevin Klingel.
Hello, everybody.
So I was just seeing Ray on the line as well. So Kevin is partly responsible for me being in real estate to begin with. Years and years and years ago, I was making money in the .com world, and I started by, Rebecca and I started by investing some and buying some property with Kevin. Kevin is also my brother-in-law. He's Rebecca's brother. But Kevin is, so he was a real, well, I guess I'll give the cliff notes, and then you fill it in afterwards. Kevin was a real estate agent up in the Bay Area and then in Sacramento. And then he moved out to Denton, Texas, just north of Dallas. And then he became a pretty big real estate agent. And then he started doing renovation properties, and then there was a lot of investors coming from California. He had a lot of network. And so a lot of people were coming from California to invest in Denton, Texas, Rebecca and I being some of them. By the way, Maury, you're in Joey Sakovich's office, and I didn't know this, but years later, Joey and I were talking. He's like, "Oh yeah, I remember." I'm mimicking Joey's voice. "Oh yeah, I remember Kevin Klingel. He came and presented in my office like 3 years ago." Yeah. So Kevin, you actually presented to Joey Sakovich years and years ago when you were looking for investors out in Denton, Texas. But anyways, so I don't know. Kevin's flipped probably 30, 50 properties for investors, maybe more. And then he started getting into buying bank-owned foreclosures, which that is a whole fun story all in itself. I imagine you probably did like 50 investment properties for other, I don't even know what the numbers are, but lots and lots of properties for, at one point you had like your own development company, you had people on staff that were building stuff. And then he went off to develop a property management company with like, I don't know, hundreds of properties, and then sold that off. And now he owns a chain of restaurants. So a true entrepreneur, but somebody who still does a lot of real estate investing, very connected with the Keller Williams people. If you know the McKissicks out there, like Kevin knows those guys. And also, there you go. There's my introduction. And did I miss anything? Anything that they should be aware of?
I mean, you kind of said it all. I can go now. Thank you.
Cool. So, I mean, here's what I will tell you is that there's a lot of things that we could talk to Kevin about. And so I'll kind of leave it up to you guys. Like what road do you want to go to? We could talk about how does he analyze investment properties and what does he look for when looking for a property to invest. We talk about buying bank-owned foreclosures and that whole world, and which is a very interesting, bizarre world. Let me tell you, I'll tell you that. Or just, what triggered me to call Kevin to begin with was that we've been talking a lot recently especially me, I've been very interested in, do we invest in California, which is historically, especially in the last 10 years, has a lot more appreciation rate, or do you go someplace outside of California where you maybe don't appreciate as well, but you can cash flow a lot easier, with a 20% investment. So
yeah, that's really interesting to me, because I think for most people, and myself included, the LA area, California, it's just so cost prohibitive. But how do you manage a property when it's, in Tennessee?
Yeah. I mean, that's the catch-22. And so how do you get started in a place like LA if you don't have a ton of money? But even if you did, even if you had, you're sitting on a wad of cash of $3 million that you want to invest, do you buy a $6 million $6 million apartment complex where there's rent control and, everything that LA has to offer that's negative as well as positive? Or do you buy a neighborhood in Texas, in a place like Texas, or, buy a lot more? So that's, why don't we start there as good, unless you have a place where you'd like to start, Kevin.
So is our focus on investing in Texas? I mean, is that what you would like me to talk about, like the market here?
How about framing it like this, in comparing, because you're somebody who obviously was in California and you moved out to Texas, you saw opportunity there. Some of that had to do with being a real estate agent, but some of it as an investor as well. What was your thinking in making in that trade-off? Well, maybe start there,
So in California, when we were in California, we couldn't make the properties cash flow we were from the Bay Area. And so we went to Sacramento, and we started investing there. So we were looking for properties that were cash flow positive with 20% down payment. I mean, that was kind of like our baseline criteria for investing, was to be able to get 20% down on the property and have it at least create a positive cash flow on paper before vacancy and expenses and everything like that. Because investing, especially if you're investing in single family rental property, you are going to have to adjust your calculations, because single family homes just are really expensive from a vacancy standpoint, because if you own one rental property and it's vacant, you now have 100% vacancy. So it's not like owning, because we've owned apartment buildings too, where you have one vacancy out of 30 units and it's 3.5% vacancy. So I think if you're getting started in real estate, I think cash flow is going to be tough in single family homes, but I think you could get better appreciation overall, because if you invest in good neighborhoods, you're going to be able to take advantage of that appreciation. And that's honestly why I think a lot of people invest, is they're betting that in 5 years from now that the property that they purchased today is going to be worth more than they bought it for. And a lot of investors, see, we started, like your question about what do you do if your property's in Tennessee? That was honestly one of the reasons why we moved out here, because we had 1031 exchange property from Sacramento out to Denton. We couldn't find a really competent property management company. So we ended up coming out here more often. And then we actually decided to move out here. And the property management was one of the reasons why we came out here, but it was just a more affordable place to do business, to live, things like that. But finding a good property management company is the key to the whole thing. Like, if you don't have good property management, you really shouldn't be investing out of the area. And if you're not willing to deal with all the headaches that come with being a landlord, you probably shouldn't be investing in rental property, because it's definitely different than buying stocks, because you got tenants that are constantly needing attention. You got properties that are constantly needing maintenance. But having said all that, we would not have got to where we are today if we wouldn't have invested in single family residential real estate. So even though it was more expensive, more time consuming, and a bigger headache than we thought it would be, it's opened a ton of doors for us because of the appreciation, not really because of the rental income. We went into it thinking the rental income is where we were going to make our money, but it really has come through the appreciation. So you kind of got to have it in your head that you're just dealing with the headaches. I mean, in my mind, this is where it's just kind of come to a conclusion for me, is you got to deal with the headaches to get the payoff on the appreciation. And you're just trying to not have to put a lot of money into the property on an annual basis to get you there. But what I love about real estate is it's a forced savings account for your equity. Like, it's, the banks don't really want you taking the money out, and it's going up in value without you having to do anything. So I really love that part about it, because like trading stocks and bonds, I'm constantly looking at that stuff, and you can change and buy and sell so easily. With real estate, it's a lot more difficult and expensive to do it. So it kind of keeps you in, I think, in the market, sometimes longer than you think you want to be there. But I can tell you every single property we've bought, we've sold for more than we bought it for. So the longer you keep the property, I think the better that you're going to do. I mean, there's ups and downs, but overall it's been worth it.
That's awesome. Anybody else have a specific question on that note? How about this? So how about like, tell us about like, so when as you were accumulating properties, did you start with single family homes, and then as you accumulated equity, were you able to then like go into small apartment complexes and stuff like that, or multifamily?
Yeah, so I can tell you from experience, as far as landlord rights, you're going to do way better in Texas than you are in California. Like, this is a landlord friendly state, and California was a tenant friendly state. So just from that standpoint alone saves you 2 or 3 months of eviction time if you end up with a bad tenant. The start to finish on an eviction is 21 days. So if you end up with a tenant that no pays, you can do a 3-day notice to pay or quit, and then you're in front of a judge within a week, and they're out of the property that same month, which is of enormous value when you're dealing with a lot of tenants. And especially when you're dealing with apartments, because you got so many tenants. And most of the time the judges will ask, did you pay rent or not to the tenant? And if the tenant says no, case is dismissed. It doesn't even matter what the reasons are. It's like, did you pay rent or not? We don't want to hear all your stories. Did you pay rent or not? And that's it. And
that's like the antithesis of California,
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's the opening question for California is, why didn't you pay rent? Let's discuss it over avocado on toast and a cappuccino.
And so we had a lot of connections to California investors. So that ended up being how we, that was 80% of what we did out here, was just taking California investors, lining them up with rental property out here, and then managing it. So we had a property management company, and we were, helping California investors find property. We sold that company to Century 21 a long time ago, but one of our one of our property managers took everything that we taught him and with our blessing started his own property management company. And he still manages a lot of property for a lot of the investors that didn't stay with Century 21 have ended up with him. So there's definitely good property management available here. But the market has changed in the last few years. I mean, now DFW, which I thought was going to happen a lot sooner than this, but now DFW is a market that is appreciating. So there's a lot more attraction to the rental market now because people are able to bet on appreciation here a lot more. Because I remember when I first moved out here, they said, you know, I know you're from California and you're used to double-digit appreciation. That just does not happen in Texas. You get 3 to 5%, and if you get that, you don't have to worry about it going down, but you don't really have to worry about it going up either. You're going to get basically keeping up with inflation. But that has completely changed now. Texas has become a much more similar market, I would say, to California maybe about 20 years ago. Like, it just feels like everybody moving here is from California. It's almost like recreating what California went through a while back. Like, people are just now that it's been happening about 3 years, starting to believe that this market can really do this. Like, most people that were born and raised here never thought that this kind of thing could happen in Texas. And I think it's a combination of things. I think it's a lot of companies moving here, but I also think that a lot more regulatory stuff is starting to make it harder and make it more expensive for builders to build. It's not quite as easy as it used to be. So that's all getting passed along and bringing up the whole market.
I remember years ago, people talking about the Texas market, and they say, like, in California and places like that, everybody wants to be along the coast, and there's only a limited amount of space along the coast. Whereas if you go to Texas, a place like that, it's just flat and there's just land in every direction. So there's no reason anyone to say everyone could just keep moving further and further out. But I feel like that only holds true to a certain extent, because then you end up with a place like Austin, which is suburban sprawl for like 10 miles in every direction. And no one wants to live, you know, an hour away from the center of town where everyone works at or whatever kind of thing. So I think there's, you know, some limit to the fact that you can build in any direction. There's land, sure, but there's going to be places where everyone wants to be near, right? Everyone wants to be close to Dallas and close to downtown, or close to, you know, Austin, the river and the lake and all that, whatever these centers are, right?
Yeah. So 10 years ago, the average price of a house in Denton, Texas was about $130,000, and now it's $330,000. So it's almost tripled in value in the last 10 years. So it's just a completely unusual thing that has happened. But there's so much growth, like you're saying. The freeways are getting bigger. People are starting to factor in the commute. They need to be closer to their job. They can't just keep going out forever. So it's starting to infill. You know, a lot of people are fixing up the older homes, want to be closer to town and that sort of thing again.
Yeah. Miguel has a question. He says, so would you say we should be very clear on what we want from any investment property, whether appreciation or cash flow? Sounds like both are tough to find.
Yeah. So rents here. So the upside to Texas is it's more affordable and it's landlord friendly. And the rents are really good. The downside is property taxes, because we don't pay income tax. There's no state income tax. So that we have a higher property tax, which is like 2.5% to 3%. So and it adjusts annually. But there's companies you can hire to fight it and things like that to get it discounted. But that is something that you got to factor into your calculations. But like a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house that was $120,000 was renting for about $1,100 10 years ago. And now it's renting for about $2,200, $2,300 a month. So the rent hasn't kept up with the appreciation quite as much, but interest rates are so low, which kind of offsets that. So overall, I think Texas pays a rent premium over what they pay in California. Like I think you're paying versus the cost to buy a house in California and your monthly payment there versus renting a house in California, I think is not as good a deal as here with what people pay in rent. I don't understand why so many people rent here, because their rent payment ends up being more than their mortgage would be. But it's been that way since I moved here. I thought like they'd all wake up, but it's a very rent heavy environment. There's a lot of people moving into the area. I think that's something that you'd want to take into consideration when you're looking at different markets is, I think there's like 3 or 4 suburbs now in DFW where over 60% of the people living in those suburbs are renters now. So I think that's something you'd want to factor into the markets that you're looking in, is like what percentage of the people are actually paying rent. But you can cash flow. It's absolutely possible to cash flow with 20% down in Texas still. That's
amazing. What about like setting up LLCs or S corps or that kind of thing? Do you do that for each property that you invest in, or do you group them together and create LLCs? How do you work that angle?
So we sold all of our houses when we got into. So we started a breakfast chain or a breakfast. We started a little house breakfast restaurant, but now we have 5 locations, and my favorite part of our business is that we own the buildings. So we're our own landlord, we're our own tenant. And so we took all of our equity from the houses and sold those off in order to purchase the restaurant locations. And the restaurants and commercial property in general is my favorite place to go at this point. I think there's better quality tenants and more opportunity for cash flow and appreciation in commercial than there is in residential. I think residential is safer because the house is going to be easier for you to liquidate for sure. And you're not dealing with as much money, but I feel like as I get older and learn more, commercial is absolutely the way to go.
Interesting.
We had a small apartment complex and we cashed that out too to buy another restaurant location. I mean, this is the ultimate scenario for us because we are our landlord and our tenant. You can't get a better situation than that. Like you're pretty much guaranteeing yourself the rent.
And what about setting up LLCs? Do you do that for each location?
So each location has its own LLC. And we have...
Is the location and the restaurant 2 separate LLCs?
Yeah, they're completely separate.
Mm-hmm.
And we try to keep all of as much cash as we can into the non-public facing entity. So we try to put the cash try to make the rent high so we can push more cash into the LLCs for the real estate because there's more protection there. There's not as much risk.
Yeah.
Versus the public facing business where you're dealing with customers and slips and falls and complaints and all that stuff. So I think real estate is a much safer place for potential litigation than a business.
Cool. Anybody, any questions so far about the stuff we've covered? David, Maury, Ray, Camilla?
Hey, Kevin, do you think the reason that commercial is better is because the leases are longer term than 1 year, so the tenants are more stable? Do you think that's the case, or?
Yeah, so one of our locations we moved out of into a bigger location. And so we've rented out one of our restaurant buildings to a tenant, and the quality of the tenant is absolutely amazing. Like, and they personally guarantee everything, even though they have their own LLC. And we got a lot of different tenants to choose from. So like the tenant that we selected for that location, it's a smaller location. We're renting it out for like $4,000 a month. They're on a 5-year lease, so you're not dealing with 1 year of vacancy. It's sticky. You know, people don't want to change their business location. It's a lot easier to move your residential address than it is your commercial address. There's a 5-year option in there. So yeah, longevity becomes a plus and not a minus, because a lot of tenants that you try to get into multi-year situations on the leases, they don't want to do it because they like to keep their options open of where they can go from year to year, where in business, they want to stay there as long as possible. And and then when they're backing it up with like $1 million of their savings, you get proof of funds and all that stuff. Like, you're getting people that are going to be able to pay this out if their business makes it or not. So you can be really selective on that part, where a lot of tenants, they don't have any money. You get a security deposit and that's it. So, and a lot of times if they trash your house, a security deposit isn't going to do anything. Like, that's not enough money. Like, we've had some evictions where you're talking $10,000, $20,000. The security deposit was gone the first day. Screening tenants and things like that. I mean, that was a one-time situation. Most of the time it's just wear and tear, carpet cleaning, paint, touch up, fix some stuff, landscaping. Most tenants are pretty good, but I feel like in commercial, if you get a desirable location, and you can find it at the right price, it is way less intensive as far as the management side goes. And you got triple net leases, so they're responsible for their equipment. Like, if their AC breaks, they got to fix it. I mean, unless the building falls down, it's pretty much on the tenant. So that takes a lot of garbage out of your, expense column.
It's funny. When I hear you say that, it sounds good, but like, commercial just intimidates me. And I feel like, oh man, that sounds good, but I could never do that. It's more complicated. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm like anything else. I'm sure there's a learning curve and there's books to read, and before long, you know what you're doing.
Yeah, they try to make it sound scary with the way they do the leases and the way they price it out and the terms they use. But I make my leases super simple. I put it back into my English. I take out the cost per square foot. I said, look, if you want the building, it's $4,000 a month. They're like, how much is that price per square foot? I'm like, it's $4,000 a month. You understand that? I understand that. So, I mean, you can make this as hard or as easy as you want for these people. Like, once you control the real estate, they got to do whatever you're dictating. If you want this building, here's the deal.
Yeah.
So we make it real simple. Like, the guy that I used to help me with the leasing, he just is like, okay, we have your language for the way you want it, and then we have everybody else, but it works fine for you. So do it your way.
That's awesome.
So I basically just treat it like a house, just with bigger numbers.
Yeah.
And they're on the hook for repairing your property. I can't believe they agree to it. Honestly, it's beautiful. And they expect that in there. Like, if you tell a tenant you're going to have to replace your air conditioner if it breaks, they're going to freak out.
Why don't more businesses own the property that they're based out of?
That's what the guy said is so magical about what you're doing. He's like, they just don't have the cash. They have just enough money to get in. See, what landlords will do on commercial property, because I can tell you this from experience, most commercial landlords are rich. So that tells you something. Like you're dealing with rich people, so they know what they're doing, and they will make it, they'll seduce the tenant. So they'll be like, I'll give you tenant improvement money, I'll like waive 3 months of rent, but you're going to pay, and you're going to lock your whole world into their teeth. And so they kind of attract you with honey, and they will take care of the big expenses for you to get you in the door, and then you never leave. And he's like, what's different about you is you're thinking longer term than 1 or 2 years down the road. You're thinking like 10 years down the road, and most tenants don't work like that.
It's funny, years ago, I remember I heard this adage that everyone thinks McDonald's is a fast food company, and the truth is McDonald's is a real estate company. It reminds me of that saying. Is that, you kind of feel like that too?
Yeah, and I can tell you something else, and this is weird to say because, I mean, we've chased loans with banks because we're in the restaurant industry. So we are not at the top of the priority list for banks. Like, they see restaurants as very risky. But now that we've had success, we've been in business for 10 years, we got 5 locations. The banks love bigger loans and bigger deals with the right people. Like, now they're begging for our business, and that just is a recent switch. And it's a weird feeling because I do not trust banks at all, but they are coming for us now instead of us going for them. And they said, we love this situation where you have a proven track record on bigger properties, because they want to make big loans. It's a pain in the ass for the banks to make all these little loans on houses when they could make a loan 10 times as big on one customer that they feel comfortable with. So it's a lot less work for them. So the banks are totally behind you doing this.
Yeah. And I remember you tell me, clarify this, and I'll give you what I remember, and then you make it right. You're saying that because you had bought because you had taken a property in a central downtown location and had fixed it up and renovated it and turned it something kind of cultural and cool with the cafe, you had other cities, other municipal locations approaching you saying like, hey, we've got this property that's falling apart. Can you guys do something with it? And we'll give you guys all these credits and stuff, right? Another thing we've learned is if you find out what City Hall is into, they will line up money for you. Like, if you're helping renovate a building in an area that they're looking to improve, they'll do these things called 380 agreements, and they have a lot of money available to help you help them. So it's worth, I think, exploring a conversation with like an economic development manager of the town you're looking in and saying, hey, what are you trying to accomplish, and where, and what properties would really make things work for you? Because these cities will bend over backwards to help you help them. If you can get on their team, like, for example, in Keller, we approached them with the idea of, if we were to put a location, where would you want it to be? And the lady looked at me kind of like cross-eyed, and then she said, I've been saving this property for the right opportunity. And she basically sold us $1 million building for like $250,000. She's like, as long as you renovate it, make it nice and everything, we've been just waiting for the right opportunity. And that's insane.
Every town we go into has these things, and they'll share them with you if they trust you. So if you can develop a relationship and get a reputation going as somebody that can help these towns out and not make them look bad and waste their money, because you'll make them look like a hero, and in the process you can ask for a lot.
Yeah. Well, I imagine it doesn't, because you guys have a cachet now. It's a very swanky, restaurant business in a part of Texas that doesn't have a lot of that. And so if you come into
yeah, but it's not just restaurants. Like I talked with a long time. So the developer for the location in Louisville that we purchased, he went to the city, they had a tract of land, and he said, if I could get you 3 restaurants, they're right across the street from City Hall. If I could get you 3 restaurants up and running, will you sell me the land at like half price and give me like a low interest loan or something like that? And they signed up for everything he asked for. He didn't own a restaurant. He just like silver plattered this great deal and put it in front of them. And he made millions of dollars off of that idea.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So there's stuff like that. Like there's a developer that we're working with in North Richland Hills who found a tract of land across the street from a school. North Richland Hills was looking to improve the area. And now they're developing that, and the city's like green lighting and streamlining all the permitting, making it super easy for them, giving them sales tax incentives, all sorts of stuff. So, because they want to keep the property.
Yeah.
So they're gonna get incentives like ongoing for like the next 10 years. I mean, you can work out any deal that they'll agree to. So I did not know it was that easy if you really work hard to find out what they want.
Yeah. That's wild. I mean, that's a,
now us going in with the restaurants helps on top of that, because not only will we say we'll improve the property, but we'll also bring a beautiful dining option for your citizens. So we have kind of a double that we can work, and we'll tell them like, go look at the other city and we see what we did there, talk to them, and they get pretty agreeable.
That's amazing. That's awesome. Any questions? Anybody have anything you want to ask? Since we have a little time left, it might be fun to talk about.
I mean, there might be towns in California that you guys just are completely unaware of opportunities if you went to the economic and development people in those towns. The big cities, it doesn't work as well, but in these smaller towns with a lot of money, they have enormous funds for this kind of stuff.
And I mean, I love going off the beaten path and just ending up in all sorts of weird places and stuff. And, backpacking and hiking and all sorts. And sometimes you're driving through these towns that are just like, they're nothing on anybody's radar. And you think like, man, it's such a great, beautiful location. You could put a couple of things here and you could totally make this into a destination location. I mean, that's how places like Mammoth happen. I mean, there's not, you could do that with a million other places that are like Mammoth or, any of those kind of things.
Yeah. Our first commercial purchase was a foreclosed church. So we bought a foreclosed church for $200,000. It is a 4,500 square foot church, and it had a parsonage with a 1,300 square foot house on the property. And we got the whole thing for $200,000. And that just appraised for like $1.5 million. But we bought it like 10 years ago. Yeah. But you just can't get that kind of deal in residential. Commercial, if things line up with the city, just the increase in value is astronomical.
Yeah, that's so cool, man. So we still have like 15 minutes here. I thought it'd be fun to talk about buying bank-owned foreclosures because I've heard some of these stories and I've gotten to see firsthand. And it was first of all, is that world still happening? Like, it's not probably not like what it was back when you were buying those properties, when we joined you and bought some of those, right? I mean, that was like a freak period of time where there was all these foreclosures happening. Is there so much of that going on?
Yeah, there not as much as back then. Plus, we stopped having to go to the courthouse because we were competing against like Blackstone. Like they were sending hedge fund people were sending people there and just buying everything.
Wow.
So that's how we got. That's how we kind of got locked out of the courthouse auctions.
So
we were bringing like $1 million of other people's money every month to those courthouse auctions and buying property, but we weren't going to overpay and bid against these hedge funds.
Yeah.
So now it's harder, and we're in an appreciating market. But like right now, we're getting ready to purchase a location in Grapevine, and the landlord is miserable. He's a dentist, and his banker told him a year ago that buying this restaurant building would have been a great investment for him. And he had a tenant go in there who didn't pay rent. And this is the risk on commercial property. And now he's so done with it, he's actually selling it to us for less than he bought it for a year ago, but it's worth a lot more. He's just totally disgruntled. And that's honestly how we've found all these properties, is we find landlords that are just done with them. So you got to find people that are motivated to sell. There are still angry, upset landlords out there that will take a hit on their sales price to dump it. And those are the people you got to find.
Yeah. So to give these guys a picture, I just think this is so just wild. I know when you introduced me to this world, I just thought it was like the most bizarre thing I'd ever seen in the world. So, Kevin told me he was buying properties at the courthouse steps, and if we wanted to come and join him, and we had bought like one or two through you, but we just happened to be in town, so we wanted to like be there in person to buy a property, if I remember correctly. So we joined you at the courthouse steps, and this is just the most bizarre thing you can imagine. There's a courthouse, and literally it's at like in this little shady spot outside, and these people all with lawn chairs. And if you were walking by, you would think there was like a little meeting of some like 12-step group or some totally incognito. It did not.
You have no idea what's going on.
And you walk and so the person comes out, and there's a few different auctioneers who hold the auctions, and everyone's gathered around, and they all have these lists that are available to them of what properties are being sold. No one has gotten a chance to go inside of any of them because they're still like they're foreclosed on, and so they do these auctions, and you had to pay cash at the time, but you couldn't bring cash. You had to go to the bank ahead of time and get cashiers and you get cashier's checks in different denominations, like monopoly money. So you get like a $50,000 cashier check and a $25,000 check, and you have all these denominations so that you could end up paying cash.
Yeah, you're gonna pay for it within 5 minutes.
You go, and then they'd auction off like millions and millions of dollars of real estate, and there's like 10 people bidding on these properties, and it was so just fucking weird. It was just so weird just to see. And then there were some shady things going on. Like
you actually went there with us, huh? I didn't remember that.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Made my summer that year. I mean, because I was a screenwriter at the time, and I was like, oh my God, this is like such rich material. Like somebody's got to write about this. And I remember one time the auctioneer there was one particular property that she went to auction off, and it was like, she said the property, somebody who was sitting right next to her bid on it, and it was done, closed. No one else even got a shot at it. And it was extremely sketchy. And I was like, something is going on with those two, because they were whispering back and forth before the thing even happened, and no one even had a shot at the property. And this guy just like immediately walked off, with this $1 million property or something. But just the whole thing was just so bizarre. But I remember you got a ton of properties, and it was always like you never knew what you got until like the day after.
Yeah, you never got into them until you bought them.
So, I mean, you have some funny stories about somebody showed up, somebody pulled a gun on you, right? At one point, right?
Yeah.
And then sometimes you'd find stuff inside that you weren't expecting. Like, wasn't there like a bunch of medical equipment?
There was a lot of marijuana in one of them. That was, I guess, medical. Yeah, there was all sorts of crazy stuff. But my advice would be, if you don't have a lot of money, I think residential is totally the way to go, because I think it's safer overall, because if you get totally screwed, you could sell it quickly.
Yeah.
If you have the time and the money, I would start locally and look for commercial opportunities through the cities. I can't emphasize that enough. I think that would be a great place to start before you start looking out of state, because there are better opportunities probably in Texas than there is in California for sure. But it's a headache dealing with something 1,500 miles away.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been awesome. Anybody else? Any other questions you have about just any of the stuff we've covered? We covered quite a bit.
Hey, Kevin, how you doing? This is Ray.
Hey, Ray.
First of all, thank you very much. Very informative. My question is, the surrounding cities, you're in Denton, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a friend of mine that moved to Austin, and I have a friend in a city called Little Elm, I believe it is.
Yeah, Little Elm's about 20 minutes from here.
Yeah. And can you speak on the residential markets in those cities? I'm noticing that a lot of Californians are moving there to the big cities, not just Austin, Houston, Dallas, but Austin seems to be the one that comes to mind, and I have, like I said, a couple of friends that moved up there. My one friend, a $1.2 million house on a few acres that he purchased about last year, 2020. And so, yeah, if you could just on the other markets of the big cities.
So, I mean, California is bringing a lot of money here, and it's pushing the whole market up with equity from the sale of the house in California, plus so many companies are relocating here. So they're bringing high-paying jobs with them.
Correct.
So it's just pushing everything up. And an interesting fact, I don't know a ton about Austin, but in DFW, there's 4 counties. There's Dallas and Tarrant, which are the big counties. Dallas has a 2.2 million people, I believe, and Tarrant has about 1.7 million people. So there's about 4 million people in Tarrant and Dallas County. Now, the nicer suburbs are all north of Dallas and Tarrant, including Little Elm. Like, that's a nice community. A lot of newer homes, a lot of money going in there, right on the lake. They say in the next 25 years that Collin and Denton County, which are the 2 counties north of Dallas and Tarrant, are going to actually exceed Tarrant and Dallas in population. There's so much growth. Plano, McKinney, Frisco, Denton, Louisville, like this area here is just blowing up. The freeways are going from 6 lanes to 14 lanes right now, preparing for this. And the opportunity to be right in the way of this is huge. Lands, commercial, everything. Like, I don't think you could do poorly in a place like you mentioned, Little Elm. I think your friend's gonna be very happy there with their real estate situation in Little Elm.
Well, she's actual agent, and she works for Compass. Am I allowed to say that? Ed, am I allowed to say Compass? Anyways,
that's all.
She's an agent. Her sister, they partnered up, and they moved from here probably maybe about 6 or 7 years ago, and they're doing extremely well.
Yeah, I think that's a good opportunity for you through referrals. Are you an agent?
I am.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a great referral opportunity for you. You can bring your investors to her that can't afford to invest in California, set up referral fees and network through her, like create pipelines. Austin too, like that's a whole nother opportunity to get people you trust on the, like, you have an advantage over probably most agents where good people real estate in those areas.
Yeah, I'm in touch with her. So yeah, it's She's they're doing a lot of flips up there. Her brokerage firm. It's called Niche Realty. So
yeah, it's a great time to be doing flips because property's appreciating so fast. It doesn't matter. You don't even need to flip it. You could just park it for 6 months and sell it for 20-30% more. It's probably like California. I mean, you don't even need to waste your time flipping it.
yeah,
Just sit on it.
yeah, cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
This is yours.
Camilla, did you have a question? Oh, I guess.
No, I just wanted to say thank you very much. I was got a little distracted there, but thank you for the insight. That's awesome. Appreciate you coming and talking to us.
Yeah, I didn't know exactly what this was, but I hope I give you guys some ideas.
They told you there was pizza and you showed up?
What's that?
They told you there's pizza and you showed up?
You guys deliver to Texas?
Yeah, right.
We're actually a part-time cult group.
Bring the chickens in.
All right, this is gonna get weird. I can tell.
So we're this is like an investor study group. So we're right now we've been reading through the book Millionaire Real Estate Investor. And
I absolutely love that book. I have probably read that book like 5 times and still look at that book because I love all the formulas. I get all into the formulas. They don't always work, but they give you the general direction.
Yeah,
I think they're great guides.
That's awesome. Well, cool. There you go. A little plug into for us to keep reading and reading along. I'll tell you one. I've got one last question for you. So Kevin always has like good book recommendations, and many of the best business books I've ever read were recommendations from him. So I'll ask you: is there any books you've read recently that we should be aware of?
Oh my God, I read a lot of books. I would totally recommend reading a lot of books. Actually, I listen to them on Audible. Let's see. I mean, I can tell you my favorite one. My favorite one is Shoe Dog. Have you guys heard of that one? The story of Nike?
Phil Knight?
Yes. That's just
I only read it because you recommended it. Yeah.
That's just the most inspirational book for me because that company should not exist after you read that book. You're like, okay, this is when it fails. This is when it fails. This is when it fails. I mean, these are just a bunch of knuckleheads that had the drive and passion and intelligence to build that thing. Like, he started selling shoes out of his trunk when he was a kid. Like, that's just crazy. Awesome. I think somebody asked me, like, if you could go back and what's the one thing you change? I wish I would have gone bigger sooner. So, and that's what I like about that book, Shoe Dog, is his goals were insane. Like, they didn't even make sense, but it's like that Gary Keller saying, like, you should aim for the stars, and if you might hit the moon or whatever. Like, as long as your goal's big enough, even if you get like part of the way there, it's going to be way better than having a really easy goal. Like, it'd be really easy for us to continue to invest in single family homes, but because we changed direction, it's completely opened up options in our life in a whole different direction because we went for it.
That's awesome. All right, guys, we got to wrap it up here because I got to run to a 4 o'clock appointment. So Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody
thanks, Dad.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
So appreciate it, Kevin. And hopefully I'll get to see you soon. And I'll see all of you guys back a week from today at the same time, same bat channel. And Kevin, you're welcome back anytime you'd like to drop in and share some wisdom with us. Doors always open. And thank you so much. I learned a lot, so I imagine everyone else learned even more. So we'll see you guys all next week. Thanks again, Kevin.
All right, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.